You can't tell a story about Canada without including Quebec. It's a cultural gem, a French island in a sea of anglophone influence. It punches above its weight and pulls influence from Europe, while the rest of us just look to our American cousins. As in all things Quebecois, there is a self-determination prevalent in the tattoo culture here. Go back far enough and you hear the same names over and over again.
It was just awesome, man. Like, I'm not kidding. It was just so busy. I don't think you could see that ever again. Like 40, 50 tattoos a day, 60 tattoos a day.
There was Tony in the Point, Keith, and then Tatouage Quebec, you know. That was pretty much it.
You know, Montreal is such an interesting city because you had, you know, a guy like Bill Baker shows up and leaves this little creative bomb, and it infects, like, you know, a few young guys. The custom culture of tattooing came from the West Coast. It rode across the prairies. It comes into Toronto. It comes into Montreal in some respect. But its main influences weren't from the West. Whereas, you know, Calgary, you know, is influenced by the West because of Paul Jeffries. That makes sense. You know, Bill Baker, you know, he works in those areas. He comes to Toronto. That's a Western influence. Now, I think Bill had influence in Montreal, but it wasn't so much the art as it was just what you could do with tattooing. Montreal, their relationships based on proximity are New York and Europe. Pierre, he's from France. His family is a tattoo family in France, so there's a connection. Safwan, going to Europe to get tattooed. It makes sense that what happens in Montreal is definitely different for custom tattooing than what happened in Toronto or Calgary or Vancouver. Just different influences.
Because when Pierre came from France, he was sent over here by his father to get his butt whooped, right? Maybe not so, maybe it wasn't intended that way, but that's what happened. And it was good for him, you know? So I think he was at Artistic with Keith, and Bill was there, and Pierre was working under Bill.
But Bill was definitely the one that changed the game by doing quality work. The best work that's been done in Montreal was done by Bill at that time, for sure. You know, and he knew so much. I mean, he knew how to tune a machine. He would, you know, he showed me so much stuff.
96 or 97, Ontario Street was still littered with, it was all flash shops. And then there was Pierre's place. And it was just this little nondescript place on the corner, this little brick building with its wood panel walls, but you could tell they were trying to make it different.
You know, we're talking the mid-90s here, early mid-90s, even the late 90s. There's a huge difference between what was going on then and what had come before it. I don't think that people nowadays can really understand the big leap in tattooing that happened. Young tattooers are starting to get a little bit of information, enough that they can open their own shops and do things different than they, you know, rebel against the way things are done. They had a better idea. They thought they could do it differently. The difference is such a huge chasm between those two. It's hard to explain, to go from really no custom tattooing to suddenly the shops are custom. They have flash, but they're doing custom.
Back then, to be the best shop, when I said I had the best shop, it was terrible, but I had the best shop. I mean, the floor was crooked and ripped apart, and my desk was like an old IKEA desk. I mean, I just put some nails, and then I plastified some flash and punched some holes, and that was, you know, it was just very simple.
That guy built a shop by himself, worked by himself, but what he did was he attracted other young, hungry artists that had talent to his shop, so they would work together and all grow. So what you have with Tattoo Mania is this shop that just really opens up Montreal. It really takes advantage of this new wave of people wanting to get big custom tattoos. Pierre's a great tattooer, and his influence coming from Europe definitely puts a different spin on things. But I think it was really the relationships he built with other tattooers and bringing them into the fold that really made an impact on that city.
Back then, the first influences I've had were Montreal shops, Tattoo Mania was the big shop back then.
So, you know, a big attraction to anyone doing guest spots, any tattooist, is a vibrant shop that has really good quality artists And Tattoo Mania was that shop. You know, it was busy, it had a lot of great artists. The atmosphere there was real friendly and the camaraderie was high, and you knew if you went there, you're gonna have a good time.
They were trying to forge into something else, and I remember visiting then, and that feeling was there then.
I had some phone calls saying that, Pierre, don't do it, you're crazy. Like they're not gonna let you open. It may be a fire in the shop, you never know what's gonna happen, right? I did it anyway.
Montreal was fucking crazy, man.
Fucking crazy, man. I don't know if people were scared of opening before, but when I opened, after that I just went, you know? So, or maybe it was so cool because everybody was coming here, everyone.
We're cool dudes, we like art, we're doing kick-ass tattoos, and no other shop around could match that, you know? Like it was a special little thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. You could see that spark. You could see it already being nurtured. Like you could feel it. It was starting to roll. It was starting to grow.
You could feel like it was like a pot of boiling water where the bubbles just start forming, you know, where you can feel that there's that like intensity that's coming on.
Things really happen in complete isolation, especially with tattooing. It's no surprise then that other young artists were making an impact in Montreal. The music and skateboard scenes were seminal at the time, and these tattooers were keen to move tattooing in a new direction.
In my brain, like when you think of Montreal tattooing, it's just PSC and stuff. I mean, without slighting anybody, but I just think of Dave Cummings. I mean, the guy, in my opinion, is like, I think it's kind of selling a short saying my favorite Canadian tattooer.
Every city had one, and back then, that was Dave. You know, he was just that new young guy doing different stuff and bringing a different style, like you said, like that wasn't European, which was already being influenced because of, you know, Montreal, France, and the Euro connection and stuff like that.
And his portfolios are like these huge tomes. They're like massive portfolios. It's page after page of bodysuits and back pieces and sleeves, and they're not just like tattoos like you'd seen before. This stuff was like, it was Japanese, but it was traditional American, but it was like this Texas style, Dave Lum, Chris Trevino weirdness. It was like, how does this guy filter all these different things and it comes out this way? And if you look at his influences, Chris Trevino, the tattooing he was doing in New York and getting tattooed by those guys down there, it makes sense when you look at his work. It's strong. It's got a lot of contrast. It is not crazy. Like, it'll not be crazy, but what's the famous saying? It's not how crazy it is, it's how you make it crazy.
I think how I place myself under Aaron Kane, you know, he was influenced by Chris Trevino. And Chris Trevino, you know, if you think about him, he's just like crazy workhorse, crazy prolific, crazy large scale work, you know, just a workhorse. And that's who I see Dave as, you know, like from all of Canada, if I would say, you know, someone that shows the most amount of beautiful, consistent, solid work and just a lot of it, it's Dave C.
Traditional sleeves with Japanese backgrounds. What the fuck? Right? Like 25 years ago? 20 years ago? Like, that's not normal. Now it's normal. People like, oh, you'd sometimes talk about the old times to people and people forget that tattooing's been around longer than the 4 years they've been tattooing.
Seeing Dave C stuff was the first time that it's like someone takes off their shirt and has a full back piece, like to the knees, not half back, and like it punches you in the face. And that's before you know what it is or care what it is.
Everything he did back then stuck out to me because he was breaking rules, not just like artistically, but in tattooing. It was just kind of like, what the hell?
Some of the subject matter would be so interesting because you'd never seen it before, but it was put together in a traditional style that you could relate to and it made sense. And you could see it from across the room.
From 10 feet away, 20 feet away, you know it's a dragon, you know it's this, then you get close and it's just like, that's a tattoo. Like, seeing that for the first time, that was like, that's powerful. That's a powerful tattoo, you know what I mean? Where the image is it's talking to you. You might not like what it's saying, and it might scare you, which is great. Like, and back then, you don't get a tattoo to attract onlookers or have people touch your skin or fucking lift up your shirt. It's like, this is somewhat armor, you know what I mean? Or like a social, you're talking to them and it's not hello.
If you look at it now, it's, if we talk about Montreal, I think those three names come back quite often. And no disrespect to others, but because the old school of the new people, you know?
We're talking about Dave Cummings, we're talking about Pierre Chaperon, we're talking about Safwan, you know, at Imago. I mean, those three guys have had this city pretty well sewn up.
But I opened in February of 1997. I believe Saf opened in May of 1997.
Back in that time, it was Dave, Pierre, Safwan. They each had their style. They each influenced differently and equally, but in different directions.
Saf, I'm from Europe, coming here. He's from here, went to Europe, you know, and it's true. So that mix was good. That was really good.
Safwan's a bit of an enigma in the early Montreal scene, I think. He's in a hardcore band. He's famous on the international hardcore music scene, and he wants to start tattooing. And he does it in the most punk rock way. He just makes up his mind to do it, that do-it-yourself ethos, you know. And he goes to Europe and talks to Tintin. Gets tattooed by Tintin and wants to know about tattooing, and Tintin, from what he tells me, just tells him, just open a tattoo shop.
Well, Pierre opened his shop. Dave eventually went back to the Point, and that was a new era, right?
Montreal is a gritty city. And that was no different in tattooing. Tattooing, the skateboard, punk rock, hardcore scenes were huge. It really formulated a lot of what young people were getting for tattoos and the art that they gravitated towards. And a shop like Tattoo Mania or Imago, that they catered to that. That was their scene, that was their people.
I had a really clear, straight line vision of what I wanted to do. I was like, we are gonna do original pieces, we are gonna do our own style, we're gonna draw our stuff, we're gonna offer a different setup environment that doesn't look like tacked together like street shop.
You know, tattooing in Montreal, it definitely has its own thing going. It's its own style. Influences come from other places than in other parts of Canada. With Saf, you know, there's obviously a European influence. And because he's kind of punk, street, graffiti background, his work reflects that. You know, it's got strong colors, it's got strong line works, it's dynamic, it's bold, it's very much his personality. It's the kind of tattoo that, you know, has impact. Not enough can be said about those three guys and the impact they had in Montreal. You know, Dave and Pierre ended up working together at Tattoo Mania, Pierre's shop, and Saf had Imago. And this was like this new renaissance of tattooing in the city. It just didn't exist before, not in this sense. And what was cool is that you had young guys who had a lot of energy, you know, and they really wanted to live the culture and devote everything to it.
The shops were scary and this and that. My shop was geared towards friends and people that came from the same scene, so I wanted to be like, come to my shop, we'll relax, it's tattoo studio. It's almost like that tattoo art gallery, you know? We're trying to do something, and it had an East Coast feel. It looked like some of the stuff from New York a little bit, but I think it was our thing.
That energy worked, you know, like they all pushed each other, you know? It's a fantastic thing that happened there. And today, you look at Montreal and it's like any other vibrant cosmopolitan city. It's dynamic, it has culture and art, and the tattoo scene there is really original. It's its own thing. The people that tattoo there don't necessarily tattoo like people in Toronto or people in Vancouver. They created their own tattoo culture.
disguise. We were made to chase the light, but you got saved on a moonless night. Get free tonight, set it all on fire. And fever dreams, talking